You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? It's because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high. Still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eye, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soul's cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs?
Not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you.
Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dreams of the slave.
What immediate results do you hope to achieve?
So,
we hope to achieve equal rights.
I'll rise. I'll rise. I'll rise.
Hello, welcome to Rise Now. COVID-19 impact on our Asian Pacific Islander community. So a few housekeeping before we start. Some community guidelines. All attendees are muted, but we encourage your participant during the conversation. Please submit content-related questions using the Q&A box that's below your Zoom. We will have about 15 minutes at the end of this session to answer questions. To open the Q&A box, click the Q&A icon at the top of your screen. Also, we will not be utilizing the raise hand or audio feature during this presentation. Please ask all content-related questions through the Q&A box. And please be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and afterwards, we will disseminate this recording to the public.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being a part of today's discussion. We're so excited that you're here. My name is Tony Young. I'm the president of RISE San Diego. And RISE focuses on urban leadership. And we've worked with the urban community in San Diego for some time now. We focus on emerging leaders who are doing true work in our community. And we also focus on civic engagement, which is what we're going to do today, to talk about those issues that really impact our community. And obviously, we all know that COVID-19 is impacting San Diego, but the question is how does it impact the people that we live next to and love in our urban communities? And so this issue is very important, and we are definitely allies to the API community, and we want to make sure that these issues are discussed. So thank you for being a part of this, and I'll pass it on to the CEO of RISE San Diego, Dwayne Crenshaw. And Dwayne is on mute at this point in time, so he's gonna.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on RISE Now, where we take on important issues in our community, but we like to say the same topics, but from a totally different perspective. And so we're excited to have a great panel tonight to focus in on how COVID-19 is particularly impacting the Asian Pacific Islander community. We know that COVID-19 is not treating all the same, and we as in the United States are not reacting the same to everyone. So we look forward to this important discussion this evening.
And with that, we'll introduce Dr. Grace Pagano, who is going to lead the discussion on this issue. And with her, she'll introduce our great panelists.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for this important conversation that we'll be having with our panelists this evening. My name is Dr. Grace Pagano. I currently serve the University of California, San Diego as the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs at Revelle College. And I have been fortunate enough to work with RISE in several capacities, and I'm so glad and honored to be here to help facilitate this conversation amongst our four amazing panelists. So at this time, if we can pull up that slide so our folks can see who will be speaking with us today. Wonderful. So excited to have a student here with us from San Diego State University, Lana Bautista. And Leanne Kim, one of our amazing community leaders, is going to be joining us, as well as Kent Lee from Pacific Arts Movement and Jason Paguio from the Asian Business Association here in San Diego. Please welcome them onto our stage this evening, our virtual stage this evening. What I'd love to do is get us started with a quick introduction of yourselves. And from your perspective, if you could share, how has COVID-19 impacted the API community here in San Diego, but even broadly? And if we can start with maybe Jason, if you're ready to go.
Sure. Thank you for having me and representing the Asian Business Association. I think the theme has been pretty current for most of us in that while the broader business community has been impacted the last 3 or so weeks, our community as a whole were affected about 3 months ago. It started for most of us back in January during our Lunar New Year celebration. So, and a lot of that was out of fear and perhaps misinformation in terms of how this virus was affecting people. And I think what ended up happening and the feedback we started receiving from a lot of our business owners was less traffic, people afraid to come in, and even to the effect of some non-Asian businesses where the employees were afraid to come in to work just because they weren't sure what would be affecting them. And this would, many of these were in our API corridors. for many of our businesses. So it started quite early for us, and then we started to see and started to do a lot of early promotion, particularly with Supervisor Nathan Fletcher and City Councilman Chris Kate, where we try to do as much promotion as we could out to the community and say, hey, it's safe at this point to come out, you know, shop and dine as you typically would in our community, and support the businesses that you love. And sure enough, to the point when, you know, we had the shutdown, so to speak, or the stay-at-home orders, you know, we were already in this advanced stage that sort of crippled our folks even more. So for us, our uptick in terms of support for our small businesses is, and the first week or so, more than doubled, and then to the point now where it's about four times the amount of intake for our small businesses. And for those of you that aren't aware, the Asian Business Association is part of the Small Business Development Center network, where we provide no-cost counseling to any business throughout San Diego County.
Thanks, Jason. Kent, would you introduce yourself and share a little bit about how, from your perspective, COVID-19 has impacted our community?
Sure. Thanks, everyone, for having me. Again, my name is Kent. I am the Executive Director of Pacific Arts Movement. Leanne is our founding Executive Director, now retired. But we are primarily known for our San Diego Asian Film Festival programming, which typically takes place both in the fall as well as in the spring, and a year-round educational program called Real Voices, which features high school documentary filmmaking. I think for us, you know, when COVID-19, or even just when we were calling it the coronavirus, started, the impact was really twofold. I mean, one is just knowing that there is this global crisis that was sort of unfolding and not really sure what the impact here might look like. As an organization, you know, focused on presenting arts and events that focus on bringing people together, the really largest impact for us has been the inability to really gather people physically. And that is a very important part of what we do, not so much just in featuring stories from Asian and Asian American and Pacific Islander filmmakers and featuring you know, those communities, but also in bringing the community together and having conversations around that. And so for us, you know, part of that impact has just been in the inability to do activities, which is not unlike what other communities are facing. What's perhaps unique for us is having the word Asian within our title and being part of the work that we do, because there has been this increased xenophobia, this sort of increased sentiment that has been focused against Asians, Asian Americans, and even Pacific Islanders, resulting from COVID-19. I think, you know, some others will talk a bit about that more, but just having to deal with being perceived a certain way, I guess, and the language that we've been seeing that's been used to tie the current crisis to China, but inevitably also to people who are of Asian descent in general, I think has resulted in a lot of stories that have come up about how people have felt an increased profiling, have been subject to verbal harassment, or even at times actions of violence, which is really, really unfortunate given that there's much more already to be concerned about at this time. So, so part of the work that we've been doing recently also is to try to build awareness and to fight back against those sentiments.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, you mentioned the increase in violence and harassment that's come from, or the profiling that's come from this. And someone who has direct experience with that, unfortunately, is one of our young people, one of our students from San Diego State University. Lana, you're the chair of AB Samahan. Would you share with our audience a little bit about yourself, but also the experience that you had with your organization and a recent Zoom bombing?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So my name is Lana Bautista. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the chairperson of Andrés Bonifacio Samahan, which is the Filipino-American student organization at San Diego State University. Among navigating academia as students, Asian students specifically are trying to navigate the rise in xenophobia and racist actions in our community. And something that happened very recently, about a week ago, was while my organization was having our own Q&A night for our board elections, we were Zoom bombed. And if you don't know what Zoom bombing is, it's when you're in a Zoom call and someone becomes disruptive and most of the time it's a stranger and they sometimes harass, they can be very obscene. And that's what happened to us. A group of around 10 people, strangers, they were unfamiliar to us, found our link on Twitter or through some sort of social media, and they used slurs against us. There was a lot of anti-Black language used as well. Keeping in mind that there were 40 members of the org in the call, and each one of them was of Asian descent. And one of the attackers thought it was okay to say, you all have coronavirus, each and every one of you. They also mocked Asian language. Somebody did a poor imitation of broken English. And we were really upset over all of that, but we're directing our anger and our disappointment into something more positive. We're trying to bring awareness to the situation. We're trying to make it our message that these microaggressions, these slurs should never slide, and they shouldn't be tolerated in any environment at any time.
Lana, thank you so much for sharing that. And it just breaks my heart that you all had to experience that. And it isn't isolated in the education system through these Zoom bombings. We're seeing a lot of hate speech coming through a lot of different media platforms. Leanne, would you come on in and introduce yourself and share from your perspective how COVID-19 has impacted you?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Leanne Kim, and Lana, I'm so sorry to hear about the Zoom bombing. You know, even before we were under the shut-in order, those kind of that name calling and singling out people of Asian descent, especially young people, was happening in our schools. And so, you know, as a mother, I feel just really protective, and I just want to give you a big virtual hug and just send you lots of love, because we can overcome that. But each and every time we do need to call it out. If you don't mind, I want to spend a little bit of time to talk a little bit about why this might be happening, and to understand why it's happening. It's important to look at the historical context of how Asian Americans and people of color have been treated, and how our government has always characterized people of color as threats. And for Asians, it began during the Yellow Peril era, when Chinese in particular were portrayed as a menace to society. They were described as like uncivilized, filthy, and diseased. And I actually have an image that I wanted to share with everybody that underscores the intensity of American xenophobia at that time. So can we go to that slide, please? There it is, this one. So this is interesting. This is an ad from the early 1900s for a popular rat poison called Rough on Rats. And as you can see, the company used this racist depiction of a Chinese man to promote the product with the phrase, "They must go." And you know that that's like a double entendre, right? So ads like this fueled the anti-Chinese sentiment back then, which then led to the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was the first federal ban on immigration. And that law was in place all the way until 1943. And even though it ended in 43, the damage had already been done. Those stereotypes have been passed down from generation to generation, and it's been baked into American consciousness. So let's fast forward now to images of modern day. So let's go to this next slide here. Nope, yeah, this one. This is a sign that was recently found outside a real estate office, and let's take a look. They're blaming the Chinese and the filthy virus. Let's go to the next one. This is a picture that was taken by a fellow Asian American journalist in San Francisco, and she was out shopping and ran across this man. And then this next picture really hits home for me as a mother. This is the father and one of his 2 young children. So he had 2 children, ages 2 and 6, and they were shopping at a Sam's Club. I think it was in Midland, Texas, when a man with a knife just started slashing them and was blaming them for spreading the coronavirus and blaming that they were Chinese. And I wish I could show you the other picture, but it was too gruesome. But we have to be able to see these images because this is what's happening. This is one of hundreds of attacks on Asian Americans throughout the country simply because of the fact that we look Asian. And, you know, this is honestly history repeating itself with the help of people at the very top of the US government perpetuating and normalizing anti-Asian rhetoric, which of course puts all of us at risk, right? So rather than giving into the fear and perpetuate the othering that keeps us all down, I just want to throw it out there that we now have a chance to reclaim this narrative and reimagine what it looks like and what it means to be API during the time of COVID-19. So I put together some more pictures here. So if we can go to the next slide here. We are creative volunteers who use our skills to help people on the front lines. Next. We are the postal workers risking our lives every day to deliver your mail and your packages. And we are the nurses and doctors who are always in harm's way, face to face with the most critically ill and making life and death decisions every day. We are also the nonprofit leaders who are raising money to feed people who have lost their jobs while also supporting restaurants on the brink of closure. And we are also the small businesses who have pivoted to contribute to the safety of our community. And finally, we are veterans conducting peace patrols in neighborhood to protect those who are most vulnerable of hate crime. So these are the images of the API community that I really want us to remember when we're thinking about the pandemic, right? And dispelling myths that our community is insular and apathetic. And you know, what's really great during this time, as we're confined to our homes, is that we've become these online social warriors, right? Going online with hashtags such as wash the hate or hashtag I'm not a virus to tell our stories in compelling ways. And for those who are listening, I really encourage you to look up those hashtags because there's some very, very powerful stories that are attached to that. And also I wanna say that we recognize too, that as much as we are facing bigotry and attacks right now, our allies are also suffering disproportionately, especially our brothers and sisters in the Black community where the death rates are 6 times higher. So this is not just about the API community, it's really about all of us collectively, calling out the devastating impact of historical prejudice and systemic racism. And the good thing is this calling out is happening. We've seen many, many non-Asian organizations step up in solidarity. For example, the Anti-Defamation League collectively brought together 180 Jewish organizations to condemn the scapegoating related to COVID-19. And that's the new narrative. That's the new narrative that I'm going to claim, that we will not be silent. We will not work in these silos, but work collaboratively together. We will not give into the othering that the power structure and white supremacy counts on that has divided us. And we need to be clear on how we are interconnected. So for example, if one part of our community is suffering, it's gonna be another part that's gonna be targeted. So when one part is suffering, we all suffer. And conversely, the stronger we are in solidarity, you know, the higher, the more quickly that we can rise this tide to lift all boats, right? So that's something that I'd love to offer and hope that we can all reflect on that.
Thank you so much, Leanne. So informative. And when we don't know, you know, our history, we're bound to repeat ourselves. So Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, good. And then going to the panelists, is there other reactions or thoughts to that othering piece that Leanne has brought up for us?
Yeah, maybe what I'll add is part of the work that we've been able to do, and really it's with a number of collaborators throughout San Diego, but as some of you might have seen in the media, you know, in the last week or two, at this point, it's about 70 different Asian Pacific Islander surfing organizations throughout San Diego have come together and put together, basically signed onto a joint statement calling out the racism, the xenophobia, the violence that's impacting Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities. This is just sort of a screenshot, I think, from the site. And we have there a link to a incident reporting tool that was put together by I think it's the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council in Los Angeles. And just in 2 weeks, they had collected over 1,100 different incidences of everything from verbal harassment to acts of violence that were impacting, you know, Asian American communities. We've had hundreds of people sign on to the support letter for this. And I think to reflect on what Leanne shared, you know, it's not just the acts of violence that we're needing to call out against. It's also, you know, even just what we called unintended microaggressions. You know, I think there are times where I'm willing to give some benefit of the doubt that there are folks who maybe just do not, you know, they're speaking from a place of ignorance and they don't know the impact of what they're saying or what they're sharing is having within a certain community. And that's actually the time when calling it out is most important, because it's not just when someone has an act of violence that we should be concerned. It's also when you have someone who's getting profiled at a grocery store and you know, they're getting stared at just for being you know, a particular race, or even looking like a particular race. You know, that's an issue all in itself. It's going to be when there are comments or questions that are asked. So it doesn't mean that someone has to be harassed verbally, because even something that to some folks might sound as innocent as a question like, "Are you Chinese?" has an impact. I mean, that actually is tied into the othering that we're seeing at the moment. So I think what we're asking for really is for people to call this out. And again, not just for Asian Americans, not just for Pacific Islanders, but for whenever they see this kind of, whenever they see these kinds of acts taking place, you know, these kinds of things need to be called out in general.
Thank you for that, Ken. Lana, Jason, any comments related to that, of the othering?
You know, I'll just jump in here. You know, we saw this you know, very early on, like in January, February, you know, during the Lunar New Year, you know, a time when Asian businesses and restaurants should have been booming. And you started to see the trickling effect, even before, you know, just like the full-blown racist attacks were happening. And I know, Jason, you've been very busy monitoring that and helping out with the Asian businesses over there.
Yeah, certainly it's having to hear some of the stories. And I think while there aren't any real reported cases in terms of any direct hate crimes, it's not something that I think we can't underscore what we've actually felt in the stories that we've heard from a lot of our businesses and people within our community. And I think while sometimes evidence might not be present, it doesn't mean that we're not having to deal with this as a community. And I think that's sort of like the bigger point, or the overarching feeling that we have. And as explained that to folks that aren't inside of our community, you know, and I think for us, what we've seen more throughout, I think, this entire pandemic is that the majority of businesses that are more culturally sort of pointed in terms of their theming or the kinds of food that they serve, those are the ones that were hit, I think, most or most impacted first. And we have some businesses that aren't technically Asian Pacific Islander theme who, were hit hardly at all. And then of course, once everything was shut down, then everybody was affected. So I think there are different factors that point to sort of what we've been looking at, or at least feeling within the community, to your point, Leanne.
And I remember even early on, there were like questions like, can I get coronavirus by eating Chinese food? I mean, just really ridiculous kind of things like that. And that to me was, as soon as I heard those kind of questions, or even those feelings of being so conspicuous now, as an Asian American out in public, when we were able to be out in public, just feeling so conspicuous. I couldn't sneeze or cough, without feeling like, oh shoot, somebody's going to look at me or run away from me, those were all signs of things to come. And I don't know, I wonder if you guys feel like the shut-in order in some ways has protected us too. If that we weren't under this confinement order, if we would see a lot more, because honestly, right now in San Diego, we haven't had any big attacks, any reports of a major attack on any one person. But of course, the hate speech has gone up tremendously. But I wonder what you guys think about that. You guys could all unmute and we could have a conversation, yeah?
Yeah, I do think being strangely this stay in, stay home order does have an impact on that, because I think there are those who are concerned about going out. I mean, what I heard from one of our peers in San Francisco, who runs the Center for Asian American Media and their festival, he shared in a quote that, for a lot of Asian American folks, when they were going out, still shopping and trying to, run everyday errands, when family members would say to each other, be safe, it really wasn't just be safe because of the virus. And this really stuck with me when he shared it. He really also, people also meant be safe because you don't know, what's out there. And I think incidences like the one you shared, Lan, at the Sam's Club show that, random things do take place, like that family that was targeted sort of, not because it was someone who knew them, but just because they look like they were Asian. It does create some sort of concern. So I've heard from folks who I think definitely avoid going out for that reason. Or, Leanne mentioned this in a conversation the other day, but for a long time, I avoided wearing a mask. Even though mentally I knew that from a health standpoint, it could be more helpful, but it wasn't until it became like a common sight that everyone was wearing a mask that I suddenly felt like it was okay to wear one. Because even early on, when you saw people with a mask, it was even too easy for someone like me to think, oh, the initial group of people who were wearing masks were from folks from Asia, because in Asia, they are so good at actually being conscious about wearing a mask and using that as a tool to fight back against pandemics, especially because they've been through SARS and MERS and other, diseases. So yeah, it's just quite interesting seeing that impact.
Well, and people in Asia wear it every day simply because of the pollution. So it's not just during pandemics, it's just kind of an everyday thing out there, and it's not a big deal.
In thinking about the long-term impact that COVID-19 is going to have on our communities, what are your all's thoughts on the long-term impact that this is going to have?
I could jump in on that one. For those that might not be aware, there are about 30,000 Asian Pacific Islander-owned businesses throughout San Diego County, of which employ, the last numbers we saw were over 50,000 people. So we have a pretty strong impact with regard to the San Diego County economy. And the big role that the Asian Business Association does is in technical assistance for our small businesses and helping them get access to capital, having them understand all the different nuances of owning a business and getting them the resources they typically wouldn't be able to have. And seeing the emergency relief funding come down, our problem is that a lot of our minority business owners have been disproportionately receiving these funds. And just for our center alone, within the Small Business Development Center network, we have helped our businesses receive over $3.3 million in funding alone between the payment protection or the economic injury disaster loan, which we would just announce that that funding has actually stopped. And the issue with that has been that it was a first come, first served basis. So a lot of those minority small business owners are in a huge disadvantage where they don't have easy access to an accountant or a lawyer, or may not have the same banking relationship as some of other communities. A big concern for us was there's a lot of language barriers. A lot of the information that was coming out was actually not done in language for our community. A lot of the issues were proper bookkeeping, and whether it was submitted to the Small Business Administration or for the payment protection or for the payroll grants, the issue was that our folks had to have multiple iterations of their grants submitted. And we were able to see from our small businesses that the larger ones were able to submit exactly when these grants opened. And a lot of our small businesses who might not have had all these resources were much later to the game in terms of what they submitted. So having those resources up front and early was a very big thing for us. And we tried to get in front of it as much as we could, but a lot of the information received were the same outside. And so that's how it affected us in the short term. Long term, once again, a lot of this funding that our businesses are receiving are going to have to come out of the books next year. And we're going to have to make sure that they're prepared to account for it. Because we don't know how long this is going to last, it's going to be another big issue for us. So, in the pipeline of what we're looking for approval for some of this emergency disaster funding, we have tens of millions in the pipeline. And as I mentioned, we only have had 3.3 million approved, and that's just the businesses that we have contact with in San Diego County.
Hey, Dr. Pagano, got a question. Maybe what would happen? What's the perspective of after this is over with? At some point, we're going to go into a new world, and what will it look like for the API community in San Diego?
I think that's a hard question to answer. I mean, so many Asian Americans are small business owners here. So, I mean, I think it all depends on what the economy looks like, right? But many, on the flip side, there are many Asian Americans who are have multi-generations living in the same home. So that makes it a little bit easier financially, since you have multiple people, hopefully working people, who live in the same home. But when I was thinking about when I was listening to Jason talk, at least for the Asian business owners that I know, and my sister, she owns a restaurant, not in San Diego, but things are going to look really different. Things are going to be scaled down. And I think that, there's going to be lingering feelings about China, the Asians, and, just the stigmatization. And we don't even know how people are going to behave when all this is over, right? We're also cautious about one another. So these are all, things that we're trying to figure out right now. And, thank goodness for resources like the Asian Business Association and for organizations like Pacific Arts Movement. The one thing that I can say in confidence as a result of this, and when we're out on the other side, I feel like the Asian American leadership community is going to come out a lot stronger. Because, having lived in San Diego since 1996 now, even after 9/11, which impacted, our brothers and sisters in the Muslim community, I don't ever remember the API community being able to coalesce so powerfully and so quickly together. We work so well in our little silos doing what we do. And we rarely really, because we're all just trying to survive, right? We rarely have the chance to get together. And so that's really one of the most beautiful things. So it's not just coalescing the Asian American community, but also seeing that the non-Asian community has our back.
Yeah.
Jason was a part of. Jason, why don't you talk a little bit about that press conference that you were involved in about the legal fund that was established for just in the cases of hate crimes?
Sure. Well, we took a proactive approach with Reverend Shane Harris and getting folks to donate their time and pulling their resources to account for our community. So it involved attorneys from LA all the way down to San Diego. And the idea had come from that there was a need in our community and we wanted to be proactive, to your point, Leanne, and making sure that there was a lot of support. And sure enough, more people joined in the effort, and it's frankly a beautiful thing. So I'll actually share that in our resources for the folks here that are watching. I'll get that ready for you guys.
And then I'll also add to Leanne's comments. She's right. The Asian American Pacific Islander community is so broad and diverse. We're talking about such a mix of different, countries, of languages. Like there are so many barriers that so often make it difficult, I think, for us to connect. So the fact that we did try to get a number of organizations together to sort of speak at least in one voice on one issue, I think was I hope not unique, but I think what's key is that, and I think Sam here asked a question about, what are we going to do as an API community to recover and stand in solidarity with others? When issues like this come up, is that we've got to do more to connect the community, the API community, and to also speak up when other issues happen. And I think part of that key is that now that we've got this list and this group of organizations together,
we've got to ensure that that same group continues to connect and to speak up. And so it can't end with this one, it can't end with this one instance.
If I could just tack on from what both Kent and Leanne mentioned, and I think this had come in the discussion earlier with what happens after all this, and I think the long-term effects, and I think many of you heard that the FBI warned of a potential surge in COVID-19 related hate crimes against Asians throughout the country. And I think that's something that we are becoming more prepared for, and seeing the reality of what ends up happening. I think, a lot of implications, and I think some of the resentment towards certain languages or things being said about our community can harbor a lot of those issues long-term. And I think staying in front of it and educating folks and being collaborative is the best way that we could approach this proactively.
Mm. And to add on to the outpouring community support, in my experience from what I've seen as a result of the Zoom bombing incident, it's not just organizations within the Asian community. Just yesterday, I had a high schooler reach out to me he's part of their Filipino club at Scripps Ranch High School. And he felt compelled to speak up against this xenophobia and racism. So it's not just like passing the limits of race, but it's also transcending barriers of generation. And it's really, really inspiring to see. And I hope that we can use this energy and we can continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think it's important to really call on our youth to really share with us, how it is impacting them and what we can be doing to educate, because we can do that in our education system. We have that opportunity to do that here through this forum. And so before we move to Q&A from the audience, and I definitely want to hear from you all in the audience, if you've got a question for our panelists, please go ahead and include that in the Q&A section. But from your all's perspective, can you share what it is that you think the API community needs in order to recover or bounce back from this?
What do we need to bounce back? I think we're doing it. We're doing it.
We need a little of everything, and it's not all different than what other communities are going to need, because the reality is that the pandemic is a global crisis, and it's not discriminating by any particular group. So I think there's a lot that we're gonna need to do together, but that's gonna include Jason with the Asian Business Association helping to support Asian business owners who have suffered from this in two ways. One, for being a business owner that in many cases have been shut down, and two, from being Asian and probably having a negative impact earlier on than most. We're going to need to be able to see how we take action from a campus level, even though campuses are closed, to bring people together. Even at Pacific Arts Movement, I mean, we're looking at ways that we're going to be sharing Asian American Pacific Islander stories, and we know we won't be able to necessarily do it in the physical space as we have. But for example, May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and what greater opportunity to try to help showcase stories from an Asian American perspective that are not the ones that are being shared connected to COVID-19. But that's work that we need to be doing every day, that in some cases we are doing every day. But I think there's a heightened need to ensure that audiences, are engaged with it.
I think I could speak a little bit to, I think particularly, and I'm sure it just doesn't start with just our small business owners, but our entire community is, I think what we need is, we need a proportional amount of resources for our community, plain and simple, whatever that looks like. And I think for that and for us, we, because of our workload and what had come in and the demand for trying to service and support our small businesses, it came down to, we didn't have enough people. We didn't have enough resources. We ended up hiring a couple more folks, actually three. We brought in 3 folks to our team who spoke Vietnamese, who spoke Mandarin, Tagalog, and being able to spend that time with our community that may be classified as hard to reach or don't typically get the resources. It was really important for us to, but I could tell you that when we made the case and we told people, we need you to step up. We need you to help our community. We need those resources. And we did it in a compassionate way, but that also provided them the assurance that the resources were going to something that was going to make a meaningful difference for our community. People stepped up, and that's why we were able to make that change. And I think when people hear that story, and the more we have the ability to tell it, people do step up. Our community steps up. San Diego is a beautiful place. And I think the more that we share our stories and the more that we ask, and then the more that we're not shy, that we stick our necks out and say, hey, you know what, we need this just as much as anybody else, and we're just asking for our fair share of resources, and sometimes it might be more than what everybody else gets because of the need for us overall. So I would say it's just getting a fair share of our resources and making sure that we're not scared to ask and be able to tell that story.
And Jason, what you said about sticking our necks out, it just really struck me, because that's something that culturally we're not supposed to do, or that we were always raised to just kind of lay low, work really hard, and things will come our way. But we know that that's not necessarily the truth. So, another thing that we need to do is we need to be loud about what our needs are. And, if anything, this COVID-19 crisis has given Asian American Pacific Islanders a platform. I've read, I've heard from more Asian Americans than ever before, and I hope this will continue, because, on a psychological level, so there's the financial impact, right? But then there's like the psychological and emotional impact on our community. We need to be able to express ourselves, and we're doing that in different ways that we have never before. And I wanted to share a couple of resources for those who want to dive deeper on this topic about the impact to APIs. There's a local organization called the Asian Solidarity Network, and they held like a national town hall meeting rather through Zoom. I think there was like 30,000 viewers at that time, and that's a local organization. You can look them up on Facebook, and they have that entire meeting recorded that you can watch. And then also there's a Facebook group called Stop Racism Against Asian Americans, and the founder is a local Laotian American, Adam Manboa, who is advocating for City Council to actually pass a resolution against discrimination and racism related to COVID-19. So he's asking City Council to actually take a stance on this. And one thing that we could all do is call or email our City Council person, if we live in the city of San Diego, to advocate for that, because we know on the national level, who's a Congresswoman, Grace Meng from New York, she's also introduced a similar resolution that's been supported by at least 120 other lawmakers. And so we also need to press people to take a stance in solidarity as well. And then the last thing I'll say is, what the API community needs is we need everyone to build up their knowledge about who we are. And that's hard because we're very diasporic. But there are ways to do that. And we have time now because we're all kind of confined, right? And Pacific Arts Movement in Kent has already compiled a list of 50 plus API organizations in which you can network into to build relationships and to get to know the community better. Pacific Arts Movement, I am partial to, but they're one of the few organizations that brings the community together through the power of storytelling. And that's something that is incredibly emotionally healing and that elevates all of us.
Lana, from your perspective as a student, what is it that you think you will need for you to be able to bring your organization and your peers out of this?
I think more than ever, we need each other. Like Leanne said, we need to group together and help each other speak out, because it does take a lot of bravery to talk about our experiences with racism and xenophobia, especially when we're wired to be the model minority. We're raised in that mindset. So I think we need to validate each other. I think we need to say, hey, we're experiencing this is real, and we're not overreacting about this stuff, because everything that we're feeling is valid, and these things shouldn't be tolerated ever.
Thank you for that, Lana. Amy had a comment that I wanted to see if some of our panelists would be willing to address. So Amy said, I have a well-meaning non-Asian friends who have expressed nervousness about having ordered a package that was shipped from China just this week. And aside from responding logically that their package has had a much higher chance of getting contaminated at a processing center in LA than in China, I was wondering if there was any other way I should have pointed this irrational prejudice.
Everything's made in China. Everything's sent from China. It's like if we were worried about that, everyone would be infected. It's like, get over it. I have to just say that. I mean, that's kind of like the same thing as, eating Chinese food and getting COVID-19. But the truth is that we have so many packages shipped from China. And, I don't know about you guys. I have not heard a single person who's been infected because they opened the mail from, Amazon or whatever. I don't know, those kind of questions get to me. Come on, Jason, maybe from the ABA's perspective, you might have something more formal to say.
I don't know about that.
I think the logical response is all you can do in this case. I mean, other than calling out that, that the comment is prejudiced along with it, because it's the simple fact and reality. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get it on a package coming from China.
Well, no matter what, I think in terms of the supply chain issues, at the end of the day, the bottom line ends up hurting our local businesses, right? No matter where you're getting your product from. So in that case, if you want to stop buying something from China, you might be stopping buying something from, one of your next door neighbors who owns a business that actually, they send their kids to school for. So I think we have to look at it from the perspective of how does this affect our neighbors, our community? They might just be a friend of yours. They might be somebody who works at a local business. So supply chain is one thing. I think the source of it is another. But really, we need to be looking at it from a more holistic approach.
Yeah, I mean, we should be really looking at how can we support our local businesses who they're all on the brink. Even if we have to pay a little bit extra because, it's not mass produced, that in and of itself is a form of activism, right? being able to look at our community, look at our neighbors and say, how can we help one another? And I like, Amy, how you called it a well-meaning friend. But, you know, all of these are really opportunities for us to open up a larger discussion. So actually, you know, that's kind of a gift that, you know, you came across that comment.
Leanne, I want to thank you for sharing the Stop Hate Facebook page. Can you tell us what that is one more time and encourage folks to sign up? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. It's the Stop Racism Against Asian Americans Facebook group.
Yeah,
and so it's called Stop Racism Against Asian Americans. And it's
Adam, I think, is actually in this webinar. So thanks, Adam, for spearheading that effort.
Yeah, and he's local.
I actually have known Adam since I think he was about 10 and I was about 14. So
oh, wow.
Our communities coming together here in Southeastern San Diego, I think which someone mentioned earlier, is what it's all about, and coalescing and supporting one another.
Dwayne, that was only like 10 years ago.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Hey, and can I just throw out there, because next month is APIA Heritage Month. I don't know, Jason, how many, I mean, I would say that most of the Asian American owned restaurants, Asian restaurants are open for business for takeout. How about we all go out of our way, you know, to try some new cuisine or support some of these throughout the month of May, and like, you know, pick something every other night from a new business and spread the wealth, you know, for these people, because they really depend on us. And normally they would be, you know, just, I mean, anybody who's driven down Convoy Street during a normal Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, there's no parking. And the fact that, you know, it's a ghost town now, it's just so heartbreaking. So that's one thing that we could be doing as well to help us rebound, is to like just intentionally go out to support these small businesses.
And Jason will treat, so that'll be the.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
And then we can do it over a Zoom happy hour.
Right, we could all just go to different restaurants and then Zoom together and eat.
So I think someone asked actually in the Q&A, you know, like what we can do to raise the profile for Asian Americans in the month of May. So I can share with you that there are a couple things that are going to be going on that I think we can sort of tie into. One is that, again, Pacific Arts Movement, you know, does a lot through film, and typically just this week we would have been having our spring film festival. And so in the month of May, we're actually working on releasing an entire series of films that are tied into Asian Americans from an historical perspective, not just a bunch of documentaries, but, you know, ways to see stories from Asian Americans about Asian Americans, you know, throughout the decades. And so we're aiming to release something in the next week and a half with a list of films that you can check out, to put together some Q&As and panels that you might be able to also connect with. But one of the initial projects that is coming out that I think we would encourage everyone to see is PBS has actually put together a documentary series called Asian Americans, and it is launching this May. We'll have more information about that soon, but it's a 5-part series that really, you know, captures the history of, you know, Asian Americans here in the United States. And you know, it's not just about, you know, the gold rush and folks who are Chinese. It's not just about certain like periods in history that we see. I think there's a lot to connect to. So for those who are looking to sort of engage and learn more, you know, that's certainly an opportunity. And same thing, I think, you know, we're going to want to tie in activities that are going to involve asking folks to visit local Asian-owned restaurants and businesses to support them, because that would be fun to have some food or a drink while we're all sitting on some kind of Zoom.
Well, we're definitely going to
Q&A.
Some campaigns on that, and I'd encourage people to even buy gift cards for the restaurants, because we know that at some point this is all going to be over, and you're still going to want to go there. I mean, we joke that, you know, Convoy has everything. The only thing they don't have is parking, right? But you know, they have so much incredible food there, and you know, you could be ordering takeout now. I know, you know, Takeout Tuesday is super popular. Well, why not takeout every day? Especially with all as great as that food is. And Wes on our team, many of you know Wesley Quatch from our team, you know, he's been ordering a lot of takeout to support local businesses, and it definitely shows if you've seen Wes lately. But anyway, we'd encourage you to go out and buy from our local restaurants. We've been actually doing some promo and working with our partners like Convoy District and also Little Saigon Foundation. So you could look to our page, Asian Business Association of San Diego, or also Little Saigon Foundation or Convoy District partnership as well for that. So definitely, I think Leanne, in terms of our favorite month, we'll definitely be doing a lot of pushes for our local restaurants.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. We have hit our time boundary. There are a couple of questions that we got from the audience. I'm going to invite Lana and our other panelists, if you want to write a response or type a response to those folks, I'd appreciate that. I'm going to kick it over to Tony and Dwayne to close us out. Thank you all so much for being here today.
So first of all, Grace, thank you for moderating this. We really value you here at Rise, and you're just amazing. So thank you for that. And I just want everybody to look at this screen. These individuals here, this is leadership. This is what leadership looks like. And the answers to us getting out of this issue are the folks who deal with this every day and who care about this community the way that these wonderful panelists care about. And I was particularly inspired by the student, Lana. It's really great to see a young person kind of get on this panel and hold her own, and you see where she's going to be at some point in time, really leading the city instead of just the university that she attends. So thank you all. Appreciate it very much. Dwayne?
And as you see on the screen now, it does say follow us on our social media. Please do that. The questions that you have asked can still be answered and probably will be answered on our social media in the days ahead. And there'll be continued information from everyone who's been on the panel today, and some of the events, maybe about the Takeout Tuesday, we can post something about that. So continue to check us out. We have another Rise Now, which is what we call this, next Thursday at 6. So plan ahead to join us next Thursday. And then Friday the 24th, we are going to do a Project MOS, minority-owned small business training, which is going to be about how to access the unemployment. If you're a gig worker, if you're an independent contractor, how can the business, as Jason talked about, access funds, and how do we get those dollars to nonprofits in the community at the grassroots level? So keep watching your eye out and make sure you participate, but we appreciate the community here and taking the time to join us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity and the space, Rise. We appreciate you.
Before we close the session, we have one poll for feedback on the survey, especially how can we improve this program, the Rise Now. So I'm opening up the feedback. So I'm launching the poll now. So it's live. If you could all please go to the polling icon. Thank you. And this will help us how to improve our program in the future.
Just want to say a quick thanks to our behind the scenes folks. So Julius and Dominic for making sure that we've got all our screens right and all the video and sound working. And again, thank you so much to our panelists for taking time out of your busy days to be here with us, to share your expertise, and also to inspire me and the rest of this community, because we can get through this, and we're going to get through it together.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Grace, for hosting. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Now, Jason, when you're going to buy me that meal?
You want it now?
I'm waiting. Where's my meal?
Get your stimulus check?
I want some takeout.
Are we still recording?
This is when the real party happens.